we had two shiurim, the beginning of Amalef, where the Alter Rebbe spoke about Yireh, but he really doesn't mean Stam as a Yireh, he means talking the Nakuda of Avedas of it. The bittel of Avdus, which is reached through his bonus and everything is the Eibishter, and Havaya Nitzav Olav, the Eibishter watches us, and he gave it the dugma from Tzitzis and Tfilm. But the Nakuda is same Tassim Malach HaMelech. Same Tassim Malach HaMelech means that the Avedas of it means you make yourself the Hashem's slave. And it's not about love, it's not about fear, it's about subservience, bittul. And he mentions Taka that there's a madrega called Ben. And everybody has to have both bechinas, Eved and Ben. But you have to first have Eved. He also mentioned Ben Shenasa Eved, which is an even higher madrega than a person who's a madrega Ben achieves the mile of Avedas of it, which is discussed in the Samavah. And now we continue by the two dots. V'hinei. We're talking about Yireh, and specifically the idea that Yireh is bittul, avdus. My relationship with God is not on my terms, but it's on God's terms. V'hinei, af me, even a person, shegam b'meichu machshavt, even in his mind and in his thought, eini margish, there's no feeling, emphasis in the word feeling and emotion. Shom yiru bush, any fear or shame. And the reason he doesn't feel any fear, which is a lower madrega, and shame, which is a higher level, is that neprisos erech nafshe, the lowliness, the cheapness of the measure of his soul, from the root from which it was carved, because it comes mimadreges tachtenes, the yutzfiras, the asiyah, from the lowest level, 10 spheres of asiyah, which the Alter Rebbe mentioned in a Hagoah in Perek Tazayin, that a yid who cannot experience Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem except for Talumas Mechei v'Libet, Tvunas Mechei, and Talumas Libi, because sometimes you can push it too low in the Neshama to get passionate about Ruchnias. Afal Pekain, still. Since his kavana is, Bavidasi and serving Hashem, to be a slave of a king, it doesn't matter how a slave feels, it matters what a slave does. Or to say more important, more precisely, it doesn't matter the emotions of the slave, it matters the sense of shmatai, of bittul of the slave. Since Shemeskavan his kavana is, Bavidasi in his avoida, to be a slave of the Eibishter, it's a complete avoid. Because key is the chiddush nifla. Hayir ava aveidash nechshav the shtei mitzvahs b'minyan tayag. There's two separate mitzvahs. One mitzvah is Yiras Hashem, and the other mitzvah is U'la'avdei b'chol avavchem v'alavdei Hashem alekechem, which is tefillah. And the Alter Rebbe is machadish. Over there in the Gemara, in Masechta Tainis, and in Rambam, when it brings the word avoida, it brings it with another word. What's the other word? What other word comes along with the word avoida in the Gemara? Heart. The Gemara asked, so it's not pshat avoided lev. Here the Alter Rebbe is machadish that when the Gemara says that the avodah shabalev is tefillah, the emphasis is not on the word lev, it's on the word avoida. And the Indian is avodas of it. Yireh is to be emotionally connected to the Eibishter, either with fear or with shame. Avdus means supposed to be Hashem's slave. How that links up with the Aveda Shabbalah of Tefillah, I'm not sure, but the Rebbe writes in the notes that that's what this is. Yirah v'Avoda is the Shabbat the Shtei Mitzvahs Yirah and Avoda, which usually means Aveda Shabbalah. But here suddenly it means Avedas of it is two different mitzvahs. Ve'einem akvazu, so there's no interdependence. So when you have fear of the Eibishter, there's Yirah. When you have Avedas of it, bittul, that's Avdus. But moreover, Shabbat is to be sure. First of all, he says you could have Avdus without Yirah. Second of all, the truth is every Avdus has at least a little bit of Yirah. Shabbat, the truth of the matter is Mekayim Gam Mitzvahs Yirah. When you agree to be Hashem's slave, and you're serving him with a knecht-like subservience, you're his slave, and you have no emotion of Yirah, says Hashem, there is fear. There's fear there. Because the fact of the matter is you're bringing into your thought, into your brain, fear. This hour, this moment, at least, made a Shemayim Olaf. I'll call upon him. The fear of Hashem is upon you. I'll call upon him at least. Like is the fear of a human being of flesh and blood who's hedyet, common, lepachas, at least. she'enei melech, which is not a king, hamabit alav, when he sees that a king is looking at him, and in this case, the king of all kings is looking at him, that even though he's a lowly person, there's no emotion towards the king, but she'nimna ba'avura, he refrains ba'avura because he sees that the king is looking at him, to do something which is not appropriate in the eyes of the king. This is already a madrega of fear. Usually fear is an emotion. You want to join us, Yankele? Usually fear is an emotion. He's saying when you have Avedis Ovid, which is Poshet Kabbalah Sale and Bittel, there is fear there. Because while you're experiencing the Kabbalah Sale, the bottom line is you wouldn't do an Aveda. That's Yira. And he brings the Gemara. In the Gemara Masechta Berachos. You should have as much awe and fear of the Eibishter. You have fear of man, of flesh and blood, and so forth. And of course, the end of the story was that his Talmidim were insulted. And they said to Rabbi Yechon and Mazaki, Rebbe, that's it, that's all you expect of us? And Rabbi Yechon and Mazaki answered them honestly, and he said, Halavai. Because Avedis of it is the lowest Madrege, but it's the deepest Madrege. In the Lashon HaChasidus, you can have a relationship with God on your terms, and you can have a relationship with God on God's terms. When your relationship with God is on God's terms, it's an infinite relationship. There's only one way to have that. Kabbalah Sela. He said, and that's why you do it. Anything else that involves your Matthias, it's a Mugbal and a Moder Dika Aveda. It's the highest Madega. In Samach Vav it says, higher than Mesiras Nefesh is Kabbalah Sela. And that's Aveda Sovet. Says the Rebbe, it automatically has Yira, because the bottom line is, because of the Kabbalah Sela, you're not going to do an Aveda. That's Yira. Teidu. The proof is that Gishad Mevid Aveda, when people do Aveda, 3 lines from the bottom, what does the person say? Shalei Rani V'Adam, nobody is watching me v'chulu. So when you don't do an Aveda, because Aveda is over, that means you believe Hashem is watching, that's also one yin of Yira. So the first thing he says, it's possible to have Aveda without Yira. And secondly, he says, Behelim, there's Yira as well. Rak Navaden. When a person has no emotional feelings of fear to Hashem, but he has this avdus, Yira Zu Nikras, this fear would be called Yira Tata, lower fear. V'Yira Scheit, it's only a fear of sin. Which is before wisdom, before Teda. While the Yiri low, Yiri Beishes, the higher fears, we have emotional feelings of fear for the Eibishter and shame for the Eibishter. As it says in Zayah, the Is Yira, there's 2 different types of fear, a low fear and a higher fear. The Alter Rebbe, Aval, however, turn to page 114 now. Beli Yira, Klau. Person has no fear whatsoever. Even if he has avodas of it, it will not fly up. Be Aval, Levad, with love alone. You have to have Yira along with Ahava. In the previous Prakim we spoke about Ahava and Yira, but upon him, it was the Regesh of Ahava, the passions. Because he has Avedas of it. And in Avedas of it you have a little bit of Yira, and therefore it's Parcha Li'ela, because you have the Ahava and at least this little Madrega of Yira. Just like it's impossible for a bird to fly with one wing, similarly, Ahava alone is not enough. You have to have Yira. The Tchilu or the Chimo and Train Katfin, Yira and Ahava, 2 wings, which comes with Tikkunim. And it says in Tikkun Zayed, and was written on page 110 at the end of Perek Mem, Dafn Hamid Beis. Stop, that's it. Yira is over. Now I want to tell you like this. Perek Mem Beis and Mem Gimel, he goes back to Yira. But over there he means Taki the Midah of Yira. Here, he talked about Yira, and forget the whole Perek started, the Reish of Ikva Shosha is Yira, but he meant the Bittel aspect of the Yira, the Avedas Ovid aspect of the Bittel, the Yira, the Kabbalah Sela of the Bittel, and over there, he means the Yira aspect. Chacha Filu, he says that over here, Avedas Ovid has Yira, and Chacha Filu, he says over there, that Yira has Avedas Ovid, that's why he says, like I mentioned, Milsa Sutra, nevertheless, here the emphasis is on Avdus and Yira is Tafel. Over there the emphasis is on Yira and the Avdus is Tafel. This is the end of Yira. Now I want to talk about Ben. Ahava is going to be the end of Mem Gimel and Mem Daled. What's the next word? V'chein, similarly, a Yira Levada, fear alone. He cannot fech only one wing, v'lei parachal le'ela cannot fly upward until you have also Ahava. But in this Perek, he's not going to speak about a common Ahava. The emphasis is B'chlal, not Ahava. Avedas Ben is just like Avedas Ovid is lower and more atzmizdik than Yira. Avedas Ben is higher and more atzmizdik than Ahava. That even though you're serving Hashem like a slave, and you have Yira hidden in this Avdus, you have to also have Ahava. You have to be a son of the Eibishter. Now, being a son of the Eibishter is a lot different than loving the Eibishter. Because when you love the Eibishter, we have in Perek Mem Gimel, it's Avas Elam. I love God because I love myself. Being a son of the Eibishter, I love the Eibishter because the Eibishter is more important to me than I am to myself. But Biklolos, just like Avedas Ovid, is Biklolos Yira, even though it's not. Avedas Ben is Ahava, even though it's not. You follow? Ovid is less than Yira, and Ben is more than Ahava. But Biklolos is the same thing. And he says, what's the pshat Ben? To arouse the natural love at least. Hamazateras believe which is hidden in a person's heart, which we had in Perek Yud and Vaiter, Ches and Yutes and Chavhei, and we also had in Perek Yudalid and so forth and so on. Right? Now what word is missing here? What word is missing here? Klolos Yisrael. That the minute you talk about Pintel Yid, he's going to say Klolos Yisrael in the next year, tomorrow. The Shem Yichud is going to speak about B'Shem Kol Yisrael. Anytime he speaks in for Pnimius on the Neshama, you have the Lashon Klal Yisrael or Kol Yisrael and so forth. In your brain at least, you should have a sentiment of you're the Eibishter's son. And of course, if you're Hashem's son, you love him. It's a selfless love, but you love him. Remember your love for the Eibishter because of your teva, your neshama, at least in your thought and your will, even though you don't get passionate about him. Let it attach you to the Eibishter. Now, attaching you to the Eibishter is Ben. Attaching yourself to the Eibishter, you're doing it for yourself. What's Ben? It's for the Eibishter. So he starts off saying you have to be a Ben to at least to have love for the Eibishter Dafka Bei, which is not Ben. It's still it's still for you. It's a Madregen Av. Dafka Bei Nafshe Lakis, to attach your godly soul, V'achayurus and your animal soul, and you'll b'shem in the garments of you, the neshama, canal with the Eibishter, and then comes Ach me, you have to talk about your Ben. What's meant a Ben? That it's not La Dafka Bei Yizborech, but it's Liyachta Kuchavichu Rashchinte Betachtenim. So he started talking about Ben, and just like by Eved, he said Eved includes Yiri, he's saying Ben includes Ahava. So it's Mervenik Dezel Berinya.